Hey, this is the new year. Everybody makes resolutions, starts new thoughts in their minds and thinking. And I thought we would do it between now and the end of the month with a short series of changing our valley view, our view of what church is. A sociologist, his name is Robert Bellah. He's written a book called Habits of the Heart. Habits of the Heart. And the book is about community, living in community. And he says in the book that in the United States, there are people who are more and more moving into what he calls lifestyle enclaves. He says that people are doing this because they're primarily concerned with pursuing a certain kind of lifestyle. And so this has mainly to do with either leisure or consumption or both. And so perhaps people want to make sure that they acquire good things, that is, that they have the right house, they have the right car, they have the right kind of furniture, and are able to go on the right kind of vacations. They want to make sure that they will be able to enjoy them and not lose them. They will want to fill their time with pleasant activities. They want things like convenient shopping. Don't even have to drive to it. Or they want to have recreational opportunities. They want a life that offers, Bellah says, comfort, enjoyment, security, and that's really the dream that the people who get into these enclaves really are pursuing. Now, he says in the book that obviously it's not that much fun to pursue those kind of things by yourself, to be alone. So people look for other people that also share that same pursuit, that same lifestyle. So they band together with other people, this is important, with other people who are socially, economically, and culturally similar to them, so that they can all share in this same lifestyle. And those, by the way, and there's a lot, who do not or cannot to afford to have that lifestyle, they're just not a part of the enclave. They just don't belong. And the word enclave, it's a French word, an old French word, which means, listen, enclosed something or to seal it off. That's the word enclave. So there is no vision in this enclave that will benefit people who are on the outside. In other words, outsiders are just irrelevant, especially to those who are on the inside. Now, here's the deal. The people who live in these enclaves, they don't call them enclaves. Do you know what they call them? Communities. Communities. And they usually have that word in their name. And you've seen this, right? I'll make one up. Landover. Big, beautiful letters. A golfing community, right? Tidewater. A swimming community, whatever it may be. By the way, I was depressed yesterday. My girls were in another swim meet, and one of my girls did very, very well. Both did very well, but I was with one. My wife was with the other. And the one I was with, I won't tell you who she is, but it begins with the letter A. She really did well. And the guy who does the deal, he came over to me and he goes, I got to tell you, he says, your granddaughter is one swimmer. I said, I got to tell you that you're going to be swimming in about 2 minutes in the Lord. So you see it, right? You see Landover, a golfing community. Or you can say, and a lot of people are in that position because they've worked all their whole life, and they go, Sunset, which I don't think would be a good name for people who are in a retirement community, right? We see these all the time. You see them all the time. And by the way, what Bella says is, though they use the word community, they are not communities, he says. They are exclusive bands of individuals pursuing a certain lifestyle, and which means they are held together by the weakest of ties, right? People long to move into them. Sometimes people will save up money for a long, long time to move into one. It's what they kind of look forward to. And these same people who are in those communities, they'll go to breakfast in the morning together. And anybody want to guess what the number one topic of conversation is while at breakfast? What's for dinner? What are we going to eat for dinner? So it's the pursuit of a lifestyle, and it's really, to the bottom line, it's just the satisfaction of an appetite. It's about the satisfaction of appetites. Many of these places, and you have seen this, they are what we call gated communities. Gated communities. And the gate there is to keep you out. You don't belong there. Laura and I have a very, very good friend who lives in Hilton Head. And of course, Laura has, her family has a reunion every May around Memorial Day. All of her sisters get together, and so we go down. And so, almost every time, this friend of ours will invite us to his little gated community. And so in this community, when you go into it, they have a guardhouse, right? It's the only I think there's a back entrance, but there's another guardhouse there. And they have guards in the guardhouse, right? Now, these guards, they're not that happy to see us, right? I mean, it would be great if we pulled up and the guard said, hey, we are so delighted that you're here. In fact, give me a couple of minutes. I would like to have a triumphal procession, and we're going to sound the trumpets as you drive into our community. It doesn't work that way. In fact, they look at my car and they begin to grill me. They want to know, what's your name? And they looked like little Smokey Bears, state troopers. I said, what's your name? And who are you here to visit? And let me see some identification, your driver's license, and they make a copy of it. They said, could I see your registration? They make a copy of it. And you tell them who you're going to see, and sometimes they'll actually call that person. And then when you go through all of that, they give you a pass, and the pass is good for 1 day. And it's a huge pass, and it says expires, really big, and the date underneath. So their job basically is to keep riffraff like you, I love looking at you and saying that, and me out of their community. They gave us really the third degree. And you know, Laura and I left, as we got through the gate, we kept, well, I mean, we just don't belong here. Now, oddly enough, this can sometimes happen in religious communities. It can sometimes happen in a church. Churches can become kind of a gated community. They can really be that way. And they may not have a physical gate, but they have a lot of kinds of gates. It can be maybe a music gate. It's not for them, it's for us. It can be like a code talk, which becomes a gate to those who've never heard the talk. It can be maybe a dress code gate, which, as you can see, doesn't happen here. My wife got this for me for Christmas. I don't know if you noticed this, but it matches. Remember Garanimals at Sears? Remember, you match 3 turtles or 3 giraffes, and they go together. That's what this is. It was on sale. Religious communities sometimes can literally be gated. There was a religious community that had a gate. It's a kind of a monastic community, and there was the fence all the way around it to keep the people who are inside, and to keep people like you on the outside. And there was a sign on the fence of this place, literally, and this is what it read: "Keep out. Beware of dogs. Trespassers will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." And it was signed, "Our Sisters of Mercy." Now, I got to tell you, God did not create His church to be a lifestyle enclave. God did not create His community to be gated in any way. The only gated community is hell. The gates of hell. God did not create His community to be a gated community, to be devoted, listen, to be devoted to the comfort and the protection of those who live behind the fence. He made His new community to be a blessing to the earth, a blessing, and to proclaim the good news to everybody. We just went through Christmas. Remember the angels. I have good news, which is for all people. So this morning, just for a few minutes, I want to look at several distinctions between an enclave, a gated community, and our community. So in Acts chapter 2, if you want to turn to it, Acts chapter 2, we're going to read a few verses, and we'll begin at verse 42. But before we read, let me just tell you real quick what the setting is. Peter and his disciples have just added, think of this, this is a new community, have just added about 3,000 who responded to his teaching. And they repented, and they were baptized, and they were all of a sudden part of this new community. So look at it, Acts 2, verse 42. This is how it's described. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings and to fellowship. And remember, that's not having coffee out there. That's having real, true fellowship, koinonia. It's the ideal of sharing things that are going on in our lives. To the breaking of bread, which is what we're doing today, and to prayer. And everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and miraculous signs were done by the apostles. All the believers were together, and they had everything in common. Remember the lifestyle they wanted in common? A golfing community. Well, they had another type of thing in common. Verse 45. Selling their possessions and goods, they gave to anyone who had need. Every day, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God, and they enjoyed the favor of the whole area. And the Lord added to their number those that were being saved. And then Luke gives us a quick snapshot of life as it was going on in the new community. Look at chapter 4, verse 32. All the believers, now this is so important for us as we go into a new year. All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but they shared everything they had. With great power, the apostles continued to testify, listen to this, the most important thing of Christianity, to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus. And much grace was upon them all. There were no needy persons among them, for from time to time, those who owned lands or houses sold them, and they brought the money from the sales, and they put it at the apostles' feet. In other words, another way of saying, put it at their disposal. And it was distributed to anyone as he had need. Verse 36. Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, means son of encouragement, he sold a field that he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. Now, here's the deal. Now, I know you got a lot of things thinking, well, are we supposed to sell our house and bring the money and give it to the elders and pastors? Yes. No, I know. I'll tell you more about that a little later. But this is the lifestyle, this is the life in a biblical, functioning community in the first century. But here's the key word. Acts 2:42, look at this. They devoted themselves. In other words, that's what brought them together. Not to pursue a satisfaction of appetites, but they shared. In fact, when Luke uses that term, it's one of his favorite words. He uses it several times. He says that they devoted themselves. Now, what does that mean? They devoted themselves. The new community, you got to say this, whether we know the definition as far as what it means, we know the word means. They devoted themselves. They were marked by devotion. The early church was, if you saw it, one of the words you would write down was, man, they're devoted. They are devoted. The word there, again, it comes from a word which means, listen, a binding promise or a pledge. So when you're devoted, you're connected with a promise. You're connected with a pledge. In other words, we could say of the early church that they were people of a promise. In other words, they had bounded themselves to God, and they bounded themselves to each other. Now, listen, that is very different from the way that relationships work, not just in the gated communities, but in the world. In the lifestyle enclave, people have a very low commitment. They say basically this, right? If it meets my needs, I'll stay. If it doesn't meet my needs, I'm out of here. There's no devotion. There's no pledge. There's no promise. And sometimes church people are like that. They say that all the time. They'll say something like, well, as long as the church is, giving what I think the church should emphasize, or if they do the type of music that I think they should be singing, or if the preaching is the type of preaching that I like, I'll stay. If not, I'll find another place. I don't really have any devotion to that place. This word for devotion, by the way, and this is true. This is not just because it fits in my sermon. You can look it up. The word devotion has to do with enduring, right? In other words, that there's sometimes pressure, enduring, or sticking to something. Sticking to something. Because I tell you, anytime there's a church, anytime there's got people in it like you, there's going to be problems. Even when it would be easier not to work on community. And that's how devotion works, right? I mean, you wouldn't even have the word devotion if it was just everything was going to be easy. You're devoted when people see you have problems and they say, man, look, they still stayed in that marriage. They're devoted to each other. Let me give you an example. Just here, mass confession, show of hands. You'll feel so much better at lunch when you know that you were truthful. How many of you ever had this feeling on Sunday morning? Or maybe Saturday night, right? Here it is. You're at the house. You had a long week. You worked hard. It's been a tough week. Maybe you had some cranky people in your life, whether maybe a neighbor or maybe your boss, maybe somebody you worked with. Or there were just difficulties a little bit with your marriage. And there's, the kids weren't exactly the best they could be. And the thought occurred to you on Saturday night, man, tomorrow's church. It would be so much easier right now, because I'm going through some stuff, just to stay home, read the paper. I can watch Joel Osteen. I can eat bonbons. And I just don't want to go to church. I'm not sure I want to go this morning, hon. Okay, show of hands. How many have ever had those kind of... See, look at you. I am so depressed. Right? Devotion here, the level is not all that high. All right, now, here's another truth. This is also true. The second question, and by the way, I have to be here. I'm the pastor. But how many of you, listen, how many of you have ever come to church on a day like that when you were thinking about, it might snow on Tuesday and maybe we'll get early flurries on Sunday. And so whatever it was, but there was that particular Sunday, it was almost 50-50. You could have gone or not gone, it's up to you. But you ended up coming. And you weren't in the best attitude. And not even our great greeters with T-shirts could cheer you out of it. And when you came, to your surprise, you sort of encountered God. Maybe you encountered him in worship. Maybe somebody in the community said something to you that was the right word at the right time. Somehow God spoke to your heart. And you had a sense that you maybe just needed to hear what was being preached, or you were encouraged when you desperately needed to be encouraged. And when you walked out, you thought to yourself as you got into your Prius, what if I had missed that? What if I would have just said, I'm not going? What if I'd allowed my last, cruddy week to allow me to miss what I just experienced? Now, how many of you have ever done that? Raise your hand. See? Almost the same group of people. And I would do the raised hand too. See, here's the deal. There will always be times when spiritual growth will require effort. It will require getting up out of the bed and doing what you're devoted to. There's no way around it. That's a part of the spiritual life. There will always be times in life when building community will be more difficult than not building community. And it would be easier not to do it. Right? Whether you're on a diet or whether you're exercising, there's lots of times you can think, man, it would be much easier to take that chocolate out of my daughter's stocking. And that's the whole idea, listen, that's the whole idea of the word or being devoted. You're devoted because it's easier maybe at times not to do it. And listen, I want to tell you this. Everybody here is devoted to something. We are. In other words, what wins out is usually what we're devoted to. And you got to remember this now. Devotion is always built on a sense of promise, on promises. See, that's why in community, it's always built on promise. And that's why, for example, as we just kind of alluded to, at a marriage ceremony, there are what? There are vows. There are promises. You said, if you're married, you said this, I promise that all that I have, all that I am, I thee endowed, or something like that. Forsaking all others, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. That's why marriage is such a solemn occasion. Because you're making promises to each other in front of people, but more importantly, in front of God. And that's why for us as a church, and I got to tell you this because there's a tendency right now in the Christian church to kind of minimize membership. And I think membership is a key tool. Membership, sometimes you'll say to somebody, you say, hey, have you been here for long? Oh, yeah, I've been here for 48 years. Are you a member? No. Because, I'm a member of the church. As far as Jesus is concerned, it's, and membership is not that important. And a lot of times when people say that, the root of it, I got to tell you, that not all the time, but a lot of times it is, what's in it for me? What's membership in it for me? If I'm a member, all that does is open me up to be on the deacon board. I don't need that. And if I stay out of it, if I can officially not be a member, then I don't have the grief, I don't have the guilt, I don't have all the things that would make me say, I got to maybe do something other than come and sit on Sunday morning. See, you're a consumer. Membership is a reminder, listen, membership is a reminder that in the church, we're not about pursuing an enclave lifestyle. We're not consumers. We're not just finding other people like us or similar culture or economic background and that we're pursuing the same lifestyle. We're about people of promise. Membership says you're devoted to what this fellowship is doing. I'm not saying you have to agree with everything. Remember, that's a part of marriage, right? You're married to someone, but doesn't mean you agree with everything that other person does. Doesn't mean there's not difficulties. We're about building a biblical, functioning community that's built on promise. Here's the promise. The promise where people say, I will be devoted to God and to others in this community. We build on promises. God's promise to us, our promise to Him, and our promise to each other. So here's the question. I got to ask you, are you devoted? Or are you just kind of riding it out? Let's see how it goes. I'm not sure. Are you going to do anything to help us to turn it wherever it might need to go? Do you have any sense of living with a promise? A promise to this community? Thick or thin? Would you bow your head? I'm going to pray, and we're going to go to communion. And I just sort of want you to maybe think about this new year. And if you got like your toes stepped on this morning, I'm sorry, but I don't apologize. My toes are hurting a bit. Father, I pray that you would keep us from being consumers everywhere we go. We are trained to be consumers. And Lord, I just kept thinking, if we do have a kind of a guardhouse or a gated community, it would be wonderful that people were flagged down on the road and say, come on in. In fact, your son Jesus said that the community is like a banquet. And the master tells the servants, just go out into the highways and byways and compel people to come in, drag them in. Just bring them in because the gates have been flung wide open. And life in the kingdom, this new community, is now available to everybody. And Father, you passionately want them to come in. Lord, as we said, there's only one gated community, and that's the gates of hell. And your son said to Peter, on this rock I will build my church, and those gates of hell are going to be busted open. So, Father, I pray that you would help us to be solid in our community, to be devoted to you, even when it would be easier not to be. Help us to pursue oneness. Help us to pursue the ideal of no division, that you would renew our thoughts on all that we have. And we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.